Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, the best place to find mental health and addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Each week, we profile a guest who shares openly about their mental health journey. They share because they understand that when people don't talk about their depression or other mental health conditions, those of us who do struggle with them can feel like we're the only ones, that there's something wrong with us, and that no one understands. We understand.
I'm Terry McGuire, the creator and co-host of this podcast. You have my promise that we'll keep it real here. Depression is real, and we're not going to sugarcoat our discussions about it.
Hope is also real, and you'll get a dose of that here too. I'm Carly McCullough, a licensed social worker and educator, and Terry's daughter. We've both experienced depression and also support loved ones struggling with it. We're here to normalize talking about depression and mental health in our communities, as well as our families.
And to share real-world tested strategies that have worked for other people who have walked similar paths. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mom.
Hello, Carly.
So, a supportive conversation or even a hypothetical podcast episode can start with an honest answer to the question, how are you?
That was my experience with my colleague, Nick, this episode's guest. We were both in the office lunchroom when I asked how he was doing. He reflexively answered, how we all do. But then he got real. And you know what? It wasn't shocking, off-putting, or too personal for work. It was utterly refreshing. Honesty is. We talked briefly. He was on the other side of it for the most part. And we went about our work days, a little better connected and a little better supported and understood.
Later, some familiar questions arose. What does struggling look like for him? What does better look like? And how did he get from one to the other? So we asked Nick if he'd be willing to do an interview on Giving Voice, and he obviously said yes. So here is Nick giving his voice to depression. We should note that this was recorded in the office, and so the audio quality is a little different than usual.
One is the reason I wanted to talk to you is because I asked you just at work, hey, how you doing? And you replied, fine. And then took a pause and then said, actually, I've been really struggling.
Yeah.
And that was so different than the normal exchange, which ends at fine.
Right.
So I found that interesting. I found that healthy. And I wanted to ask you about that. Why did you choose even in that setting to say, actually, I'm not?
A long time ago, I decided that it's so much harder to actually lie to people when you're not feeling great and you're not at your full capacity versus just being straight up. And I think in our culture, especially in the United States, where we don't talk about things, saving face, especially in the corporate and the work setting, I do think that it sets people aback a bit, and we're just used to always the default, fine, things are great, even though most of the time they're not. So for me, I have just over the last several years put into practice where if somebody asks me how I'm doing, I'm going to be straight up like, not great. And usually people don't know what to do when I say that, right. And that's to your point about maybe doing a bit of a double take when I said that. But I do feel strongly about that because I think we'd learn a lot more about each other if we were just generally more vulnerable with each other versus trying to internalize everything for the sake of saving face.
Is there a hope behind saying, I'm not great? Is there a hope that somebody will say, is there anything I can do? Or do you want to talk? Or are you just saying it and that's the important piece to you?
Just saying it. Just being candid with, here's where I'm at today. I'm not fine. I'm actually not great. But the fact that I'm not fine and not great, so you're going to love this, is also fine. Right?
I agree.
Like, it's okay to not be okay, that phrase that I feel like more and more people are beginning to use, right? And that's what I believe in. It's okay to not be okay.
It's easy to assume that people keep their true condition, their true selves, hidden out of shame. And it might be sometimes. But often we say we're fine because we know the real answer would make the person asking feel uncomfortable.
Because that's why we say these things, right? It's for the other person. It's not for us.
Right.
Just being being candid and being true to where you are at in that moment.
So generally speaking, before we get into your story, what do you think people most get wrong about depression?
I think generally speaking, if you haven't dealt with depression to the extent that I think a lot of clinically depressed people have dealt with it, they, oh, just stop that. Turn it off. Don't be depressed. Go work out, do something, like just stop being depressed. But as those of us who suffer from it know, it's not how it works.
So when did depression first show up in your life?
I would say depression first showed up for me when I was in my early teens. Now, prior to that, I'm very open with this, right? I'm a leukemia survivor. So at the age of 8, I was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. As a result of that, already kind of being a more anxious kid with various things, my mom thought it'd be a good idea for me to start seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist. Her son's, going through a disease that could probably kill him, that might cause some additional anxiety, right? So I began seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist. I ended up being put on an SSRI. I think it was Zoloft was the SSRI of choice around that time. And that was more for anxiety, but I don't think the depression actually manifested itself until probably my mid-late teens. And it actually more had to do with my sexuality. That time period being in like the mid-late 2000s, like definitely different than had I experienced this awakening in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, right? But it was still one of those things where you look at the world around you and you're immediately like, oh boy, I know what this means. So you suppress that. And unless you're a gay man having gone through this experience, it's really hard to explain what that suppression feels like, and not only the mental toll that takes on you, but the physical toll. And in my case, both of those combined, it turned into clinical depression. So as I then went through my collegiate years, it continued to get worse and worse. Luckily, my junior year, everything kind of hit ahead. I decided to go seek help, meet with a psychiatrist, a therapist, was diagnosed with clinical depression.
The American Psychiatric Association reports that LGBTQ plus people are more than twice as likely as heterosexual people to experience a mental health disorder during their lifetime, and approximately 2.5 times as likely to experience depression, anxiety, or substance misuse. To be clear, LGBTQ plus people are not inherently more mentally ill. They are more frequently exposed to conditions that can harm mental health, and often have fewer safe, affirming places in which to seek help. Since Nick's depression diagnosis, he says he's become more attuned to the signs and symptoms that signal he's going into a low period.
This thing on life is a constant roller coaster, but when you're depressed, those lows just become abysmal. So for me, I, at this point in my life, know when one of those is coming, and I know it's going to last about 3 or 4 days. And I, like I said, I'm very thoughtful with this because I like to understand things, take them apart and put them back together.
One of the biggest lessons we've learned doing this podcast is the value of identifying our personal early warning signs. They are to depression what chest pain is to a heart attack. They give us a little time to use whatever tools we have to protect ourselves.
But yeah, being very in tune with this, right? Like I just know after I go through that first day of being irritable that the next 2 days are just going to be ruminating over things, and there's anxiety coupled with that. And, knowing that a lot of these things I'm thinking about are not nearly as bad as they are, you can't help it. But what I have learned going through day 2 and 3, because mine are usually 4 or 5 day cycles. It's weird, right? Day 2 and 3, if I am by myself, it is much, much, much worse. So I have become very intentional that even when I'm going through a depressive episode, which I usually get them twice a year now, I know this is how in tune with this I am.
Wow.
And I still don't know what sets them off. It just happens. But going through that day 2 and 3, I become very intentional with being around people. Like, I'll message Brett and I'll be like, hey, can we just like hang out or like play video games or do something?
Being around people is so protective for Nick that he makes a point to head into the office, even though working from home is an option.
And you caught me in an episode when you asked that question. But what was helpful was just that I was around people. Even if I don't talk with anybody, I am very jovial, generally optimistic and just a lot of energy. People notice pretty quickly when I'm not that way, including yourself, and ask me how I was doing. But once I get through day 2 and 3, usually day 4, it kind of feels like, okay, we're back to light irritable. And then day 5, we're typically out of it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So tell me what they're like. What is your depression like for you?
When you say what is it like for me, just emotionally, the physical toll, what I think about.
All of it.
All of it. It's just this profound, sadness. I'm sad and don't really understand, understand why. And it's really hard because I'm a fixer. And even in those moments, I want to fix it, but I know I can't fix it because I'm just sad. And it's kind of turns into this vicious cycle that, it's kind of actually makes it worse. There have been episodes where I feel like, oh, nobody cares about me type thing, rationally knowing that's not the case. But in those moments, that's how it feels.
When you look back on it all, is there a time you identify as when it was worse? The worst?
Yeah, it was before I came out as gay.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the emotional and physical toll of not admitting that and being myself that made them the worst they'd ever been. There were a handful of what I would classify as quote unquote mental breakdowns I went through in college over this. And I'll actually never forget the night I did end up coming out, which was the night of my 21st birthday, of course, right? Because the best time for this huge life thing. And I came out to my friend who I was rooming with at the time. And I just remember the moment I said it, it was of course I was crying and they were big old crocodile tears and everything. But I just remember him looking at me going, after I said I was gay, he's like, I've never seen your eyes clearer. It was immediate. It was this weight was just lifted. But it was also funny that after I admitted that, the episodes became much farther lengths of time apart in between.
Yeah.
I was able to manage them more. And this is why I'm saying, I don't think it definitely is talked about enough in the gay community, our individual experiences with this and how it just affects you so much mentally and the pressure you put on yourself that then creates mental health, clinical mental health things like depression, or high anxiety, or in some cases I have read bipolar, or the cascade of just holding that in is so hard.
So that's what you're talking about, holding it in and not coming out, not being your true self, versus or also including once you are, the way the world is going to receive and treat you.
Both. Because in your head, you build it up so much that, all these people are going to hate me. And I use the word hate intentionally here. All these people are going to hate me because you just don't know how people are going to react. And luckily now in 2026, right, the tide has turned significantly. We live in a world where being gay is, for the most part, fully accepted, right? You look at the polls that they do and the largest number of Americans are accepting of gay people than ever in our history. So at least we have that going for us that makes it easier. But still, it's such a personal and unique thing.
So after it was the worst, when it was you were in college, then what did you do to manage it? What did you do to have it not get even worse or to not get into suicidal?
Well, there was a point, and I'll be open with this. It's funny. At one point, I wouldn't have been comfortable sharing this, but it's part of my story, and really, Brett is probably the only person that knows it, and now the world is going to know.
Brett, for the record, is Nick's best friend.
Yeah, it was around the 2017 time frame, and I really can't point an exact reason why, but I had a depressive episode, and it got really, really bad. It was probably the lowest one I was at, and I had made a plan to kill myself.
Oh, you had a plan.
Yeah. I had made a plan to do it. Luckily, I decided to not act on that plan.
Mhm.
And I called my best friend and we talked through it. And thank God Brett was just there to listen, because it talked me out of probably doing the ultimate, something you can't return from, obviously.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it did get bad to that point. Now, luckily, have not had anything like that since.
Mhm.
And I've done a lot of work to try and understand why it got that bad around that time. And I cannot put my finger on it.
I don't know that there's an it to put your finger on sometimes.
Yeah.
It just seems to be a symptom sometimes and for lots of us. So can I ask more questions on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were suicidal to the point where you had a plan and you called your best friend. What did he say or not say that helped?
It's funny when you're kind of in that emotional moment, things do tend to get fuzzy because a lot of words are exchanged. I think I can describe the feeling more. And
Okay.
The feeling was compassion.
Mm.
The feeling was compassion and love and caring about me. And I needed that. And it served its purpose.
And he didn't call the police?
No.
Or come and bring
No.
you to a hospital?
Obviously, I do think words were exchanged like, you really need to convince me like you're not going to do anything for me to avoid doing that.
Mhm.
And luckily we talked through that and everything. But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So really in those moments, I do think when you're talking to somebody, it really does come down to empathy and compassion and love, really,
Mhm.
right?
Because one of the things that's most clear to us, and I put that in quotes, is that nobody gives a damn about us. And if somebody is behaving as though they do, that is in contradiction. It's sort of like proving you wrong in real time or proving your thoughts are wrong.
Right. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Put yourself in the position of somebody listening to this. What can you tell them? Is there something you've learned through your whole experience with depression that might save them an awful lot of time to hear?
It's going to be very cliche, but it is so, so true, is you are not alone and talk about it.
Hmm.
The more you try and pretend or try and save face for others and don't put you first in those moments, the harder it's going to be, because you matter. What you're going through matters. And there are so many people that do care and want to help. And it gets so much easier when you're just like, I'm going to stop living for others. I'm going to stop living for others. And I'm going to accept that for now, and maybe even forever, this is a part of me, but I'm going to deal with it in the way that I need to get through it, regardless of what anybody else thinks or says.
Wow. Nick hasn't just stopped living for others. He has really figured out his own formula and his own relationship to his depression and what he needs to be well in this life.
Yes, he's so clear on how often they come, how long they last, what the first day is, the second, the third, the fourth. I'm nowhere near that level of understanding with my own.
No. And again, depression does manifest differently in everyone. And so
Yep.
it is possible that yours are not as predictable as that.
Mm-hmm.
Here, listening to him, I thought, I've never heard someone in a male body talk about the patterns that their body goes through. But he's done such a beautiful job in his self-reflection and his healing to understand that his depression is something that is happening to him,
Mm-hmm.
much like the trauma and repression of being a gay person in today's society or in the past. And so I think there's this sense of, my body is reacting to this world. My body is reacting to something twice a year, even if we can't exactly put our finger on it, almost in the same way that if someone was with a shellfish allergy was exposed to shellfish twice a year, their body's gonna go through that process, And we often talk about how healing it can be to understand depression and other mental illness in a similar light as we do physical body illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think listening to his process and his processing, really brought that up for me.
Yeah, good point.
And so sort of along those same lines, like one of the big sources of peace that I heard in Nick's story is around the importance of self-acceptance, including the fact that me, you, Nick, we have depression.
Mm-hmm.
And accepting that rather than trying to fight it, trying to cast it away. But there is this like, yep, this is a thing that happens to me, and we're going to do it. And it's actually the hiding of that, or the closeting of that reality of our experience that makes us sick.
Interesting word choice. Closeting.
Well, yeah, right? I think it is about closeting. It's about, I mean, he's saying, you know, that the look in his eyes immediately changed when he came out to someone. Like
Cleared up.
The physical, mental, spiritual, like all of that stuff. These things are interconnected. Well, in Nick's story, to come out. For you, it was powerful for you to do this podcast and to talk about your own experience. That was your own form of sort of coming out of the closet around mental health and the fact that this is something that impacts you and our family. I've heard it with people with neurodivergence to go, oh my gosh, it's so helpful for me to be able to say, this is what's going on for me, and really live in that fuller way.
It's very interesting when we're discussing mental health to realize the many ways that our lives and our senses of self and our willingness to be our true selves factor into our overall mental health. You know, they're absolutely not. I'm a mentally healthy person and I keep parts of my life hidden. And it may be your best option too. We're not saying whether it's mental health or sexual orientation or anything else that you'd be better off having that be public, because it's not true for everybody and it's not safe for everybody.
Yeah. Safety and context is really important. And, you know, I was so delighted to hear, you know, Nick say that he experiences the United States in a really gay-friendly way. And I also know so many people who don't. People's experiences are very unique, and people need very different things in order to be safe in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their families, in their workplaces. And people need to be the experts of their own experience in that. And maybe in the same way that people come out around being gay or queer at different ages, I would guess that there are different times in life where it feels safer than others to come out around mental health and depression.
Yes.
You know, when you asked me about co-host, I was like, is this the right moment in my life to be public about that? I wasn't intentionally hiding it, but
weren't talking about it online either. Yeah.
Right. For sure. And what is it costing me to not be open about it? And I hear that in Nick's story, that to sort of push something down or to squeeze something in, like if you think of like sucking in your gut or something like that, like it actually takes energy, like a lot of energy and a lot of consciousness, a lot of mental energy to clench in that way. And I think when people are hiding some part of their truth, regardless of what that is, that takes energy. So again, what is it costing me to do this clenching that I've even become quite normal with? And so it also takes energy to deal with haters. It also takes energy to find people who love you for all that you are. And so I just wish that everybody can have a place to be their full selves. And I'm struck that, you know, this interview is really a tribute to what it is to be that person for someone. And it's been Brett for Nick. And that's so beautiful. And it's really special to be that person. We can't be everything to everyone, but it is really important that each of us have a person who is.
And not everybody does.
I know.
Yeah.
And we all deserve it. We all deserve it. And it is what keeps us safe, as we hear in this story. And it's also what makes us still interested in living, whether we deal with suicidal ideation or not. It's like there's something powerfully healing and powerfully nourishing about having someone who you know has got you.
100%.
So we hope this podcast can be a little bit of that. And just a reminder that there is a really vibrant, supportive, and
monitored
Facebook group, Giving Voice to Depression on Facebook. It is one of the few beautiful places left on the internet. So check it out, because you're not alone.
Thanks, Carly. And thanks, Nick. I really appreciate you taking the time to just squirrel away during a work day and record some of your story to help other people.
We really hope that this discussion helps give some language or context to your own depression or ideas for how to support someone else in your life living with it. We invite you to check out the hundreds of episodes in our archive and to explore both the Resource Hub and treatment options on recovery.com. Depression is too dark a road to walk alone.
We'll be back next week.